This is Carolina Carole in the studio. I welcome Freedom viewers, and let's get straight to the important news. Today, Russian forces carried out a drone strike on Kharkiv during the day. According to the city mayor, Ihor Terekov, the enemy attacked the Slobitsky district with a combat drone. Market was hit in the attack. At this time, 2 people are known to have been injured. Several market stalls were also damaged. In Zaporizhzhia, another Russian shelling destroyed a private house. According to the head of the regional military administration, Ivan Fedorov, the Russians targeted the city's residential area. The building is essentially destroyed. Emergency services are already on site, dealing with the aftermath of the attack and assessing the condition of nearby infrastructure. 4 people were injured as a result of Russian shelling in the Cherkasy region last night. The enemy used attack drones for the strike. This was reported by the State Emergency Service of Ukraine. Residential houses, cars, private businesses, and garages caught fire. A gas station was damaged. Rescuers extinguished all the fires and saved 3 people. They were hospitalized. Russia continues its attacks on Ukraine's civilian railway infrastructure. This was stated by the Ministry for Communities and Territories Development. And according to the agency, this morning the enemy launched another attack on Ukrzaliznytsia facilities. In Zaporizhzhia, Russia directed a UAV at a locomotive. It was at the station. At the moment of the strike, the locomotive crew was in a shelter and was unharmed. The ministry reminded that the railway performs a critically important function by transporting passengers, humanitarian aid, and goods essential for the economy. The Russians understand this and are deliberately targeting the railway.
The Russian army, just like in previous days, is focused on terrorizing our logistics, especially the railways. There were, in particular, strikes in the Dnipropetrovsk region and in Zaporizhzhia, specifically targeting railway facilities. Today, during the conference call, we assigned certain tasks on this issue to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, and the head of Ukrzaliznytsia. I expect these tasks to be carried out today.
As a result of Russian attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, consumers in the Kharkiv, Sumy, Dnipropetrovsk, and Cherkasy regions have been left without power. Restoration work continues at energy facilities that were damaged as a result of the shelling. This was reported by the first Deputy Minister of Energy of Ukraine, Artem Nekrasov. According to him, all possible measures are being taken to ensure the stable operation of the energy system. There is still a power shortage in the Kiev region.
Due to the difficult situation in the energy system. Because of the difficult situation in the energy system, emergency shutdowns have to be implemented in certain regions, but as soon as the situation stabilizes, consumers will return to the planned hourly schedules. Despite all the challenges, Ukraine's unified energy system continues to operate in parallel with the continental European power grid.
Representative attacked Ukraine with an Iskander-M ballistic missile and also launched 171 Shahed-type attack drones. This was reported by the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The attack was repelled by aviation, anti-aircraft and missile troops, REP, and unmanned systems units, as well as mobile fire groups of the Ukrainian Defense Forces. According to preliminary data, air defense forces shot down or suppressed with REP means 157 enemy drones. Russia has significantly increased the number of attack drones used for strikes on Ukrainian settlements. For the purpose of shelling, the enemy uses more than 100 Shahed, Italmaz, Gerbera drones, as well as other types of drones every night. This was stated by Yuri Ihnat, head of the communications department of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in an interview with RBC Ukraine. He also reminded that Russia uses Molnia and Lancet drones in frontline areas. And during massive strikes on Ukraine, this number reaches 500 or more drones. Previously, Russia more often used cruise missiles for strikes. Now the enemy's tactics have changed, Ihnat emphasized.
All of this together seriously affects our ability to repel such attacks, especially when the strike is targeted, localized, against a specific region, for example, against Dnipro, Odessa, or Kyiv. To repel such attacks, we have to use everything we have. Surface-to-air missile systems, aircraft, electronic warfare, mobile fire teams, as well as interceptor drones, which are being talked about a lot these days. This is an innovative and efficient way to shoot down enemy drones. In previous years, there were more missiles used in combined strikes, but now there are significantly more drones, and since 2025, there has been an increase specifically in ballistic missiles. Yuri Innat, head of the Communications Department of the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in an interview with RBC Ukraine.
Heavy Russian losses are accompanied by intense but unsuccessful attacks along the front line. In the past 24 hours, 179 combat engagements have been recorded. The most tense situation remains in the Pokrovsk direction. There, Ukrainian soldiers repelled 41 attacks by the Russian army. Active assaults are also continuing in the Konstantinovka sector. There, Ukrainian defenders stopped 11 attempts by Russian invaders to break through the defensive line. The enemy also unsuccessfully tried to advance in the Lyman direction. And in the Polish sector of the front, the Russians carried out 32 attacks without achieving their objectives. The situation for Ukrainian defense forces in the northern Slobozhansky direction, particularly in the city of Kupiansk, is stable. This was reported by Viktor Trehobov, spokesperson for the Joint Forces Group. He also believes that those Russians who managed to slip into Kupiansk in small infantry groups are actually doomed.
The Russians are positioned directly to the north of the city and to the east, not even of Kupiansk itself, but of the Ukrainian forces bridgehead on the eastern bank of the Oskol River. And it is this bridgehead that they are especially actively trying to put pressure on, aiming to reduce it and ideally to capture it. But they've been trying to do this for months. It hasn't even gotten smaller. On the contrary, there is now active destruction of Russian forces taking place there. Therefore, the situation in the city itself and its surroundings, I would say, is stable and very positive in terms of eliminating enemy forces. The group of Russians stuck in the city center are either scared or still hoping that somehow they'll be rescued from there. This means that their command is keeping them in the dark because there's physically no chance of rescuing them. Viktor Trigubov, spokesperson for the Joint Forces Group, speaking live on the Yedini Novini Marathon.
Ukrainian military have denied claims by Russian propagandists about the alleged capture of an industrial facility in Kupiansk-Zloviai. According to the 43rd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, a Russian sabotage and reconnaissance group was actually trying to secretly advance toward the settlement. They had a flag with them for a staged photo shoot, supposedly to show a victory. The sabotage and reconnaissance group was destroyed on the approach, and Ukrainian defenders carried out a sweep and published footage confirming full control over the area. On the 1,440th day of the full-scale war, Russia continues to suffer heavy losses at the front without any successful attempts at an offensive. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, in the past day alone, the Defense Forces eliminated another 850 Russian occupiers. The total combat losses of the Russian army since the beginning of the invasion have exceeded 1,241,000 people. Ukrainian defenders also destroyed 2 tanks, 1 armored vehicle, and air defense equipment, 25 artillery systems, 1 multiple rocket launcher, as well as nearly 150 units of enemy automotive and special equipment in the past day. A day of mourning in the Dnipropetrovsk region. Today, people there are honoring the memory of those killed as a result of the Russian drone strike on Ternivka. Let me remind you, 16 people were killed there the day before. The epicenter of one of the strikes was a company bus. People were returning home after their shift when the aggressor attacked with drones. According to Serhiy Beskresnov, advisor to the Ukrainian Minister of Defense, the Russian occupiers saw and identified the target as civilian, but still made a deliberate decision to attack. Bringing those responsible for Russia's war crimes to justice is a necessary condition for a just peace. This was stated by Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha, after the Russian Federation's drone strike on a bus carrying miners in the Dnipropetrovsk region, which, as I remind you, resulted in the deaths of civilian workers. Sybiha emphasized that the bus was not a military target. He also noted that such crimes confirm Russia's status as a terrorist state.
This was not a military target. These were just hard-working people returning to their families after their shift. This is truly horrible. Once again, Russia proves its status as a terrorist state. The Russian killers responsible for this and other atrocities must be brought to justice. Accountability for one's own actions is necessary to achieve a just peace. Andriy Sybiha, Ukraine's deputy foreign minister, on social network X.
The EU ambassador to Ukraine, Katerina Mathernova, also condemned the attack on the bus. She noted that Russia only pretends to discuss a ceasefire, while in reality, it continues attacks on the civilian population in Ukraine. The next trilateral meeting between Ukraine, the US, and Russia is scheduled for February 4th through 5th, also in Abu Dhabi. President Volodymyr Zelensky announced this ahead of his video address. According to him, Kyiv is ready for a substantive discussion and is interested in ensuring that its results bring real peace closer. Previously, the meeting was planned for February 1st, but as became known the day before, Putin's representative Dmitriev met separately with Donald Trump's team in Florida. The Russian side claims that the discussion focused on a peace track and economic cooperation between the U.S. and Russia.
There is already an agreement for a trilateral meeting at the appropriate level. This meeting will take place next week, as planned, on Wednesday and Thursday. In the Emirates, just like last time, I just spoke with Rustam Umarov. I scheduled a meeting to coordinate the framework for the conversation and to prepare everything. On Monday evening, the team will already be on their way to the negotiations. Many leaders from different countries are supporting Ukraine in this process, and in fact, we coordinate almost every day.
Moscow is increasingly pursuing its goals in the Donetsk region not through offensives, but by using hybrid methods. In particular, during negotiations with the United States, Russia creates the appearance of a desire for diplomacy. But in reality, it wants to gain control over the entire Donetsk region. This is reported by the Institute for the Study of War. According to analysts, the Kremlin is proposing to freeze the front line in the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions as a so-called concession to hide its real objectives. Experts note that Russian officials are trying to present the seizure of the Donetsk region as a moderate position in order to secure strategically dangerous concessions from Ukraine. Russia loses 20 to 25,000 soldiers killed on the front in Ukraine every month. These figures were given by NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. He called this number unacceptable for Moscow, since replacing combat losses is gradually becoming a challenge for the Russian army. These data also confirm the information from the General Staff of Ukraine, according to which the total combat losses of the enemy have already exceeded 1,240,000 people. Who is the Kremlin using to replace the killed and wounded? Find out in our report.
Russia's losses at the front are approaching a tipping point, at which the aggressor may face a shortage of personnel, writes Business Insider, citing experts and officials. In total, the Russian army recruits 30,000 to 36,000 people every month.
With these actions, Russia once again demonstrates a complete nihilism toward life and the value of life, essentially reinforcing the narrative that was created in the Soviet Union. And during World War II, when a certain tactical and strategic advantage of the Soviet army was also built on this. In other words, when it is emphasized that a human life means nothing, and the state is ready to sacrifice a large number of its citizens to achieve its goals.
Although Russia has a much larger mobilization reserve than Ukraine, the Kremlin has all this time tried to avoid large-scale forced mobilization and has recruited volunteers by any means possible. Among other things, they offer large cash bonuses to those who agree to fight against Ukraine. The Russian authorities are offering high salaries, tax breaks, debt forgiveness, and regional incentives, in some cases reaching tens of thousands of dollars.
The government is offering conscripts high wages and an extensive benefits. Regional authorities are offering various enlistment bonuses, sometimes reaching tens of thousands of dollars. For example, in the Khanty-Mansiysk region of central Russia. According to local authorities, a conscript will receive about $50,000 in various bonuses. This is more than double the average annual income in the region, where, according to reports, the monthly salary for the first 10 months of 2025 was just over $1,600.
After nearly 4 years of fighting, the Kremlin is trying to replenish the army by any means possible, experts say. They offer prisoners release from jail and foreigners a simplified path to citizenship. Recruitment doesn't stop for a single day. Yes.
We're talking about mobilization. We can see that the Russian Federation has long been working with other sources to replenish its army's personnel. We're talking about mercenaries, about the active work of Russian recruiters in different countries around the world, Latin America, Asia, and so on. In other words, this is systematic work, and it's the best indicator that since they've been doing this for a while, things aren't going as well for Russia in terms of human resources as they'd like to claim.
Analysts say that by massively recruiting foreign mercenaries, Russia's solving several problems for itself at once. The first is replenishing their personnel. The second is reducing the losses of the regular army. And the third is purely pragmatic economic issues. They can pay foreign mercenaries much less than Russian citizens.
What are the Russian occupiers taking advantage of? The low social standards in these countries. To put it in another way, the monthly salary offered to these foreign mercenaries, ranging from about $500 to $700, is a highly compelling financial incentive when they are signing their official contracts. Meanwhile, this amount is much less compared to the pay of Russian occupiers, which, let me remind you, is about 200,000 Russian rubles.
Citizens from the Asian country of Bangladesh were recruited to Russia for work where they were promised civilian jobs or military service far from the front lines. At the same time, they were sent to carry out tasks in the war in Ukraine, according to Ash Press. Russia's recruiting people from various countries, China, Yemen, Cuba, African countries, the Middle East, and Europe, to fight in its army against Ukraine. According to Ukrainian intelligence, there are currently between 15,000 and 17,000 foreign mercenaries fighting for Russian forces against Ukraine.
Moment of signing the contract, the Russians do not emphasize the fact that foreign mercenaries are actually used as the main contingent of so-called local assault units. In other words, these are the small assault groups that unsuccessfully attack the positions of Ukraine's defense forces. It should be noted that in the Russian segment of Telegram and in Russian media, there is an extensive amount of documented evidence from international mercenary fighters themselves who say that there is absolutely no substantive discussion regarding any combat coordination or specialized professional military training whatsoever.
The Kremlin also continues to rely on prisoners as expendable material in the war against Ukraine, according to Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service, sending to the front those who are serving sentences for serious crimes. And those who return to civilian life after the front go on to commit crimes again. According to official data alone, since 2022, Russian courts have found more than 8,000 participants in combat operations guilty, about 900 of whom were involved in cases of violent crimes. At least 423 people have died as a result of the actions of these so-called veterans. And this is a direct consequence of a policy that replaces justice with war.